The following is a presentation of Moonlight Media Works. Hello and welcome into another edition of the Collins Janus Show. Recording this Thursday, May 21st. It is the weekend of the Indy 500 Coke 600. We brought you the Indy 500 Coke 600 Memorial Day Extravaganza preview show with Matthew Owens. Earlier on in the week, Matthew Owens of the Ultimate Sports Network, doing some great stuff there. His TikTok account is blowing up with all the play-by-play clips he's doing. He's been a great friend for many years, as knowledgeable as anybody in the history of man when it comes to Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We really appreciated him coming on the show and talking us through those two races. And before we get any further tonight, we had plenty we're going to talk about with regards to the racing action coming this weekend, as well as some interesting stories and other fun stuff we were going to do tonight. But around 5 o'clock this afternoon, we got the news that, in fact, Kyle Busch, age 41 years old, one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time, had passed away, really unexpectedly for everybody in the community. And I've been sitting here for the last couple hours before I got on to do this, trying to figure out exactly how I want to approach this, because it still really does not feel real at the moment. There were so the timeline works like this. For those that haven't kept up with the story, Kyle had withdrawn from the racing this weekend. Austin Hill was going to fill in for him in the 8 car due to an illness. Then today, throughout the day, we started seeing more and more people out on Twitter reaching out going, prayers for Kyle, he needs them right now. And that's when you started to see the tenor of this discussion start to change. And rather quickly, it just kept moving in that direction. And then out of nowhere, around 5 o'clock, all this stuff starts to break, around maybe about 5:30, I think, technically. That Kyle Busch had passed away. And so I had, explained, I think I even sent the text earlier to my mother about it, and that things weren't looking like it. He was definitely dealing with something strenuous and not good health-wise. And obviously, if you've been following the NASCAR season, he needed to be tended to by a doctor at the end of Watkins Glen. And, I think naturally a lot of us race fans just kind of looked at that as like, well, occasionally when a cool suit or, the temperature or whatever else, or just the conditions of driving like that can beat you up over the course of a race. That's not always the most surprising scenario. We've seen drivers deal with that even when they are 100% fine and everything else, or just get beat up over driving a race car for that long, especially in a road course setting. So I don't think it really raised alarms in the way that it would now, knowing what we know. And we still know nothing about it. And we're probably not going to get anything specific as to what ultimately Kyle was battling. But his health deteriorated very quickly. I believe he didn't go in or have anything. Like I know people that saw him this week, like earlier in the week. Like he had been on media shows earlier in the week. It was like 2, 3, 4, 5 days ago. Over the last couple days, he was up, about, moving around. He had Brexton's birthday not like 3, 4 days ago. His son Brexton, who's a racer at Millbridge and runs Bandoleros and a bunch of stuff, really promising young talent in his own right. But, I mean, he turned 11 years old in the last 5 days. And here we are on a Thursday before race weekend, and out of the blue, Kyle Busch is just left. And he leaves behind a family that, a young family with Brexton at 11. He's got a younger daughter. He's got his wife, Samantha. And this is the stuff that just, this is the stuff that really beats you up to even talk about, because it's just the most miserable, depressing topics to think about. And this is one of those moments of the year. We talked about it on the Tuesday show. This is one of those fun times of year where everything is so cool and all the racing coincides, and you see guys like Kyle. We thought of a guy that might get to do the double at Indy and the Coke 600, and I believe Jay Fry, the one of the co-owners and men in charge of IndyCar, posted his M&M scheme that they were trying to get done in like 2017, that they were going to run an IndyCar with Kyle in that spot. And, it's now you start to hear all the stories of things that like were going to happen that didn't get to happen. Dale Jr. posted about it in his piece earlier tonight about, his thoughts about the loss of Kyle, talking about how he's going to rent his late model at some point this year for Junior, and all the excitement and all the things. And you have to understand too, Kyle, the last couple of years in Cup hadn't gone the way he wanted to, but with all the NASCAR anniversaries and the 75th anniversary, the drivers' retrospectives, the Hall of Fames, all that was still coming for Kyle. He still had years he could go, and he racked up his 69th win in the Truck Series. I mean, between the top 3 series in NASCAR, you will not find a guy who dominated in as many periods for as long as Kyle Busch. Like, he owned the Truck Series. When he got into a truck, it was game over. I've talked about this for years. Seeing the Z-Line Designs Toyota Camry pull up in the Xfinity Series, you knew you were cooked if you saw that car rolling out of the trailer. To put my own personal touch on this, the first NASCAR race I ever went to was Darlington 2008. Diehard Tony Stewart fan. So I was a Joe Gibbs Racing fan at the time. And, the funny thing about NASCAR fandom is it's not like being a fan of the St. Louis Cardinals or a fan of the Chicago Bears. You're not just identifying with one team. In racing, it can be a manufacturer, it can be an individual team, it can be an individual driver. And you can go hot and cold with drivers. You can be a fan of somebody when you're younger, and by the time you get older, you don't appreciate them, or vice versa. And at 10 years old, that guy right there was my be-all and end-all with racing. But I remember in that race in 2008 just being mesmerized by the way Kyle Busch drove that race, mesmerized by the paint scheme. Look, you're a kid. Marketing in racing works. And for many, many years, Kyle Busch had a market cornered on the most badass, cool paint schemes you could have. And the Indiana Jones M&M's one, I believe, was promoting Crystal Skull, I believe, the Indiana Jones movie that was out at the time, I believe. And it was just so cool. And he ran that race. He won that race. I had to leave the racetrack that night with an M&M's hat. I did. I had to leave the track with an M&M. There's pictures of it, and I can't find them right now. But, I mean, me and my Tony Stewart shirt had to go to the J.L. Gibbs Holler to get an M&M's racing hat after that. And, I went back and forth with Kyle because I loved early Kyle when he was really mixing it up, creating controversies. Like during the whole Dale Jr. drama of 2008, between his battle there with the 88 and all the people that wanted to, fight him for taking out Dale Jr. at the height of Dale Jr.'s excitement and popularity at Hendrick in his move after DEI. It was like, I liked that somebody was doing that. And I mean, I'm obviously wearing a Dale Earnhardt, you can see it there, Dale Earnhardt t-shirt, and I've got the Dale Earnhardt hat. Obviously, it coincides with what's coming this weekend. But really, and I know this is a cliche, and I would argue with people all the time not to do this. But in a lot of ways, there are not many figures that hold that big of an influence over an entire audience of a sport the way Kyle Busch is. Kyle Busch was polarizing. There was a large segment of the fan base for many years because he was in the Toyota. He was driving for Joe Gibbs Racing. He would mix it up. He got involved with those guys, the Jeff Gordons, the Jimmy Johnsons, the Dale Juniors, the Tony Stewarts. He'd mix it up with everybody. So he ruffled a lot of feathers along the way. The moment, I can tell you as a fan, when he got into it with Ron Hornaday Jr. at the in the Truck Series, when Ron was battling for the title and Kyle wasn't racing for the championship and all that stuff went down. I mean, that soured me on him for a period of time. But you'd come back in spurts because then he would do something to somebody else and way to go, Kyle. And very few people in any form of sport competition make you feel the way Kyle Busch made NASCAR fans feel. Kyle Busch, as far as the talent goes, he's one of the greatest we've ever seen. He's run in the 24 Hours at Daytona. He didn't get a lot of opportunities. I think he was going to take advantage of more of them. I think he would have run maybe the Indy 500 at some point. He was running micros. He was running, different dirt cars over the last couple years. He's run dirt late models. He's been doing all sorts of things. You go to the Tulsa Shootout. I mean, he took a big interest in developing and helping to start his son's racing career. I mean, so he was running all those different things with Brexton so he could help him get better at it. And RCR's last couple years, I mean, that first year at RCR, he looked great. And their performance tailed off to a later couple years, but even more recently, they had been trending back upward a bit. Kyle gets the win at in the truck series. I mean, all these things take place in such a short period of time. And it really, it's easy to point this out because life is short and life is so sudden and quick when it goes like that. But if it taught you nothing else, it taught you to live in the moment and to love the people that you have around you while you have them. I mean, and that goes for your immediate family members. This has nothing to do with, being a fan or celebrity or anything like that. You care about the ones you love while you still have them because nothing is promised. Tomorrow is not promised to any of us. But for the entire NASCAR, I mean, last night I was at the Joey Logano charity benefit at Coyote Joe's with a bunch of NASCAR friends and other people that work in the sport, some of my friends that don't. It was a lot of fun. And I believe Kyle had his own charity deal that night, and he didn't show up to that. And I think people started to go, wait a minute, something might be to this. But it's just everything about this week is supposed to be about, celebrating what we love about racing, taking time to honor those who gave all for Memorial Day weekend. And now we're sitting here really just bewildered. That's the best way I have to say it. When I heard this news, my mother called me because I had told her about it earlier in the day. I guess getting back to a story I never finished. I was on my way to the grocery store, had to get a couple things for dinner, and I had told her about the story. I was like, well, yeah, I don't know anything. Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows what's going on. She calls me, and he's like, he's gone. And I'm like, no. And this is the terrible part of living in this time period, is you just have to assume that, like, no, somebody on Facebook posted that, someone trying to get a click, somebody was like, oh, Kyle Busch has passed away. And it's the shittiest part of this business, that there's this desire to want to be first, and that happens all the time with celebrities, and they have to come out and go, no, guys, I'm not actually gone. So my guard is immediately up, like, okay, sure, yeah, okay. And then she's like, no, I just got it. And I looked, and I literally had to, like, pull over. Like, I got to the parking lot of the Walmart that I was going to, and I just stopped. And I had to look, and I finally found when NASCAR posted, and I was like, I mean, this is my face. I was like a deer in headlights. I just didn't move. Like, I was just reading it. And I'm like, no, he was just there the other day. He was at Dover. He was in the trucks. I saw him in the trucks. You just don't realize how quickly this stuff happens. And again, my heart goes out to his family, his fan base, the people that worked in the industry. That's the other thing that people don't realize. Like, this weekend means so much for everybody because they're at home. All the teams are based around here. The community of NASCAR is a very small one. And I'm fortunate enough to have enough friends that I've had a chance to experience all the really good parts of that community. But it really does hit you when something like this happens. Like, this is not, an isolated incident. I mean, not too many months ago, we had Greg Biffle pass away in a tragic plane accident. And we're like, you're a couple years removed because Greg's been out of the car and he's not at the racetrack every week. And obviously that's a tragedy, and, the response to that has been great. People putting together efforts to, remember Greg, especially guys like Cletus McFarland, all the tribute paint schemes and everything. But this is a guy that's actively competing with you. And he didn't die at the racetrack, because there's always the accepted reality that when you do what they do for a living, that you may get into a car for the last time. This wasn't that. This was a way. This was behind closed doors. Nobody knew about this. So when it hit like a ton of bricks. And you can have whatever opinion about Kyle Busch you want. This is a humongous loss for the sport of NASCAR. This was a dissenting voice amongst all the things that happen in the sport. Whenever good things happen, Kyle's there. Whenever bad things happen, Kyle was one of the first to say it. Kyle represents, a demographic of drivers that doesn't exist anymore. He's the one trying to hold people accountable on the racetrack and trying to do all those things. One of the last guys of an era that is gone basically now. Dale Jr.'s gone. Jeff Gordon's not racing, or, gone. Tony Stewart's gone from the sport. Greg Biffle passed away. Ryan Newman's in and out, not much anymore. You could go down. Mark Martin's not racing anymore. Dale Jarrett's gone from the sport, other than being on the TV side of things. Like, all these figures that grew up shaping the sport we love, they're not racing anymore. So the guys that are veterans, even Kevin Harvick, who's just now going to the Hall of Fame, we couldn't even, we have the Hall of Fame. We can't even really talk about it because, it's all secondary. Because this guy, who was going to be in the Hall of Fame, he's going to be in there. I mean, you could put him in tomorrow if you want to. There's nothing that guy had left to prove. He qualified on the pole his last day for Daytona 500. Everything he was doing now was just icing on the cake career-wise. And I think he wanted to be there for as long as possible to be able to help Brexton along and help his career along. And, I would have loved to have seen that. And 41, I mean, you're not even halfway. And I understand everybody's life is different, but God, 41 is it's just too young, man. It's just too young. And he left a young family behind, and it's like your heart breaks for them. It does. Because from all accounts, and I've interacted or been around him a couple of times at Millbridge, by all accounts, Brexton Busch is he had his head on straight from day one. He knew his last name was famous. He knew his dad was famous. His uncle was famous. He knew that he was having all those things. And when he went out to the racetrack to race against other kids of other drivers and families and teams and whatnot, he knew that everybody be looking at him from the time he started. And from all accounts, he's been as admirable a young man in that spot can be. So, I mean, I don't know where you go from here. I'm sure this weekend will be flooded with tributes, as it should, to Kyle and what he meant. But, just speaking to my own, Kyle's one of the greatest racing talents I've ever watched. I got to see him win several races across my time as a NASCAR fan, in person and on TV. So, I mean, it's just gutting. It really is. And we're going to go on and do the rest of the show, but I mean, this is, there's nothing really, it's not going to be an immediate, okay, back to normal. This is something that's going to hang for the entire year and going forward. You will see the impact of this loss for years to come. There's just not that many guys left that have that impact on the sport. There are a few, but of active guys, you won't find one that demanded more, commanded more, tried to get more out of the sport of NASCAR and as a race car driver as a whole than Kyle Busch. So rest in peace, Kyle Busch. Rowdy, Wild Thing, the Candyman, whatever you want to call him, was one of one. I mean, I wanted to sit here and spend the next few minutes talking about the Coke 600 and such, but I mean, we'll give you you can go back and watch the show from Tuesday on YouTube here if you want. Matthew Owens and I had a great discussion about that. I will go ahead and give you my predictions because I promised that I would give you those predictions in this week's show. For the Indy 500, I've gone back and forth. Alexander Rossi, by the way, we did not get a chance to update this in the show the other night because it was Monday, and today it came out on Thursday that he is cleared to go after his scary accident on Monday. That Alexander Rossi will get to stay in the car. He will be able to run the Indy 500, and that's great because he was getting a great starting position, qualified so well, ECR up at the front. That was something that everybody wanted to see. And before that accident, he factored into my overall opinion of this race very highly. Look, I said it in the show. I had a lot of skepticism once Alex Palou got the pole that Alex Palou was going to turn this into something less than entertaining. But the more I've been going through this week, I'm thinking that there's going to be some intrigue. I think there's going to be some late intrigue. I think Alex Palou will have a big grasp on this race. I think a couple guys will give him periodical battle during the race. I think, though, this race will play out late. I think maybe it's a late caution one way or the other. Maybe even a fuel strategy, something that will shake things up a little bit. And I actually think this year I'm going to go with David Malukas. David Malukas in a Foyt car last year was really, really damn good. And the whole reason you moved the timeline up to get David Malukas in the 12 car and you excise a legend like Will Power out of that ride is because you see the talent coming from a guy like that, and you don't want to miss him out going to somebody else. So David Malukas qualifies on the front row for this race. Matthew gave you Scott McLaughlin as his pick. I think, to me, I'm going to go with David Malukas. I think this will be a bit of an outlier. I think he won't even lead that many laps, but I think he's got the talent, he's got the car, he's got the team to do it, and I think this race falls into his lap late. I'm not saying he doesn't run up front. I think he will run up front for most of this race, but I think Alex Palou is going to have something transpire that ultimately keeps him from winning this race. So I think it will be compelling and interesting. It may not be the interesting I want, because I wanted to see some of the other teams, like, I wanted Newgarden to get off to a better start. I've made no bones about it that I am a big Newgarden person, and when I saw him win in 24, I mean, that was as good an Indy 500 as you'll ever watch. And a finish, like, I'm ruined to go to the Indy 500 after that. Like, how do you top that? Do I have to have 3 wide coming to the stripe? What am I going to have to do? But it's incredible, and I've been a big Newgarden fan since the time I got into the sport. You can go down the list. There's some really intriguing options. I think Colette gets the Rookie of the Year over Schumacher. I know Colette's got to start in the back of the field now due to his qualifying time. I think there will be some interesting names, though, at the front, but I think Colette gets the Rookie of the Year for the finish over Schumacher. I didn't love what Schumacher brought in overall pace and time and what I've seen just all around from that car. So I think Colette and Foyt have a better setup for this. So I think David Malukas is your winner of the Indy 500, and I think, that would really justify to a lot of people that were very skeptical, rightfully so, for the way they handled the Will Power situation. But if David Malukas turns around and wins the Indy 500, then everybody will look at Roger and go, the captain strikes again. Moving to the 600, a little bit more wide open than the Indy 500 this year. Obviously, you could go back to Denny Hamlin, Tyler Reddick. They've been so good on mile and a halfs. Toyota's been so good this season. Chevrolet's been good on the mile and a halfs as well. Chase Elliott got his win at Texas. Overall, I think Hendrick will have a really strong weekend. This is a personal playground for that team, and their cars show up ready to go. I mean, they take a specific pride being the team closest to the racetrack. If they don't run well at Charlotte, then something's terribly wrong. And I think, you'll see Larson, Elliott, Byron all factor into the equation up there. Bowman will probably be consistent somewhere in the top 10 to 15 as well. I think all 4 of those cars run well. I think Christopher Bell will run really, really well at this race. And in fact, I think if I had to give a pick right now, I'm probably going to take Christopher Bell to win the Coke 600. I mean, this is a guy, previous champion of the race, hasn't had the season he wants, but the 600 miles, we talked about it on the show with Matthew, that extra 100 miles really does kind of give you something to work with. And as strong as JGR has been, any of those teams could win it. I just think a guy like Christopher Bell does really well when you have to push a car and have to do all these different things. And in a 600-mile race, he sets himself up very well to do that. The weather right now is, I'm not even going to play this game. I think tomorrow night you get the truck race in. Saturday is probably a washout. If you want a proper update on all these things, go follow Brad Panovich for your local Charlotte news. For the Indy weather, you're going to have to do, I think Race Weather on Twitter does a good job about that. IndyCar weather system guys are always checking that. It's the damper that always comes down on this, and I've gone to the 600, if not every year, almost every year since 2016, 17, somewhere in that range. I've been going basically every year since Austin Dillon won in the 600. So minus the year I went to Indy. So it's always a factor. You will deal with rain at some point in this weekend. We've had drought weather all year long up until this point. And all it takes is for NASCAR to have a big race that they have to run, and we're going to get some this weekend. So I do think we'll get it in. That's my cautious, optimistic attitude that I have. I'm always of the belief that we'll get it in, even if we don't. It's always hard to tell. But there you go. I'm going with David Malukas and Christopher Bell as my picks to win the Memorial Day doubleheader. If you want an F1 pick, find an F1 channel because I don't care. Some other topics we had this week. We had some interesting news on the sports side of things that transpires to both the retirement and the return. So we'll start with the return of UFC's own legend, Conor McGregor, squaring up for a fight on July 11th against Max Holloway. Should be quite an interesting scene there. It will come after the White House card. There seems to be a lot of positivity coming out of the camp from Conor McGregor's side. I think the biggest thing is, and he's already said, he's like, I'm better than ever after ending a 5-year layoff. Look, the Conor McGregor saga is an interesting one. I grew up a fan of Conor McGregor. Like, he was the reason I watched UFC fights. And Conor McGregor has lived a very troubled, confusing lifestyle for the last 10 years. Basically, anything in his life that has transpired after the Floyd Mayweather fight has gotten messy. Some of which I don't even know the correct answers to. I am a fan of the persona, the showman, the fighter. At his best, Conor McGregor was box office. And for the sake of both the UFC and anybody that wants to see this, I hope it goes well. Because I know how I felt when the last two didn't go well. The fights against Poirier, those ending the way they did. The thing about it is, UFC's in this weird period. They just made all this money in this Paramount deal that they have. All the deal with the Supercard show with the White House in July. I think it's the one right before this, but don't quote me on that. On the White House lawn, they're going to do that. And that card has already come out, and some people were disappointed with that. I think a lot of people wanted McGregor on that card. I think they genuinely would have tried, but I think there were some factors working against the ability to do that. But overall, I have to say, I hope it goes well just for the sake of all involved, because UFC's ratings, I think, have kind of gone down a little bit without having it in front of me. I know that the metrics and the interest have deteriorated, and people are often like, first of all, UFC people are the worst to try to figure out why UFC struggles to continue, because they think everything is the coolest and greatest. Like, UFC fans overall are fascinated by all the fighters and the minutia and everything. What you don't understand is the casual viewer moves the needle, and when the casual viewer has something that they can latch on to, that makes everything so much easier as far as a business is concerned. Now, Dana White gets that. I'm just talking more toward the diehard MMA audience that's like, well, you should care about the 158th best jiu-jitsu fighter in the world who's in this card. And it's like, I can't do the homework. I can't do the homework. It's not an assignment for me. But Conor McGregor, the second that name comes through the door, that's immediately okay. That's a name, that's intrigue. I got to check this out. There were a couple of guys, like John Jones to a lesser degree was like that. Daniel Cormier, Brock Lesnar. Obviously, that was an easy one for so many people. You could go Ronda Rousey in her prime. Like there were a lot of those. And even Ronda Rousey kind of ending her career the other night against Gina Carano. I mean, that was whatever. I mean, I think that was a mismatch waiting to happen. Even as far out of the ring, as far as a competitive MMA match that Ronda had been off in between, I still thought she was going to do exactly what she did, and she did. And that's the other side of these things, is people get disappointed when they try to buy into a big name coming back from something, and they get left with a lackluster result in a match that ends in like 15 seconds or something. Ultimately, it comes down to all these forms of entertainment when it comes to fighting. You have to build a star. or else you rely upon people from the past, whether it's Mike Tyson fighting Logan Paul or Jake Paul or any Paul that you want to pull, or Floyd Mayweather having to fight Logan and Tyson having to fight Jake. Like, you have to do all these things because we can't build boxing stars. Like, we had Tyson Fury for a little while there, but even he wasn't enough to overcome. But at the end of the day, it's not enough. You have to have people that the casual the casual fan, the middle American that can say, okay, I want to find out how to watch this. I have to be given a reason to. Because I don't think there are enough just general people that are so deep into MMA. Like, their devout following is as hardcore a fan base as you will ever find. And I salute all of them because I have all my niche fascinations and obsessions, and I love them as well. And UFC is a phenomenally run like show as far as the presentation is concerned, and the production and all those things are valid. And there are some incredible athletes up and down the roster of these cards. But from a casual viewer's perspective, you have got to give Johnny Walmart something to root for. And Conor McGregor does that. So Conor McGregor is going to come out here in the lead up to, and he'll probably play it a little bit more down the middle, but I'm sure in the back of it, they're going to be poking him and like trying to poke the bear to go, all right, stir something up, talk shit, do something, spar, do this, whatever you have to do to sell this fight. And nobody does it better. Nobody does it better than McGregor when he's in his go mode. So that's the intrigue. Do I think he'll win, or do I think it'll go well? I can't tell you that. I'm not an expert. I know the last two did not go the way he wanted to. They were, you have to go back to the Cowboy fight for the last time like he truly got after somebody quickly and got on and won. But the last two fights he had just did not go well, and obviously had the injury that took him out of that last fight. I mean, so there's been a lot of stops and starts in the last couple of years with McGregor from a pure entertainment, and I'm not talking about the person or whatever else, because there are all these like things that have gone on with Conor legally and all those other things that I don't know the answers to, and I don't have the answers to. But from a pure like business and entertainment perspective, yes, UFC is more interesting when a guy like McGregor is fighting. And there's not many people left that can do what he does to sell a fight. On the other side of things, another figure that looms large in his respective sport, Aaron Rodgers, has decided that he is officially coming back to quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers for this season, but this will be his final season atop the starting job of an NFL team. And obviously the big networks had to go right into his legacy and all these different things of where does he rank all time, and it's like, we can have those conversations at the end of the year. In the short term, this helps the Steelers out because they did not have a backup plan at the quarterback position. They really didn't. They can front however much they might like Will Howard or any other options they might have had, but they did not have a clear succession plan. They didn't have a clear plan at all, if you're being honest. If you go back and watch my first show when they hired Mike McCarthy, all of this feels like stopgap. Coach, quarterback, defense is still the top most expensive in the league. Offense is still hit or miss. You let George Pickens go be crazy good in Dallas. I mean, you put in DK Metcalf, who had his crash outs last year. For an organization that used to be one of the best run in any sport, that had the Steeler way and all that, and the way the Rooney family and all their, grand dynasty of it all, nothing moves the needle anymore in the right direction for them. And I don't know what they have to do to get back to where they used to be, but they are, to me, as nothing as they have ever been. And while Aaron Rodgers does help in the short term, and I'm glad that Aaron will get to have his send off and go his way, because I think he is one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen. Now, the point I always like to make, though, is one Super Bowl win as a quarterback, all the stats and MVPs you can want. For all the people, though, that said all those years ago after he took over for Favre and immediately did better that he was going to blow by Favre, statistically speaking, MVPs-wise, Favre did a lot of those same things. He doesn't turn the ball over as much as Favre did. But I think a lot of people just naturally assumed that Aaron Rodgers was just going to blow past anything Brett Favre ever did in his career. And in the end of his career here, There's all those things that go wrong with the Jets. Then there's that, just the injury history over the last. I mean, all these things catch up to it. And as good and as talented as he was, much like Favre, you look back at a career and go, one Super Bowl, a lot of MVPs, a lot of gaudy numbers, really good late in games. It very damn entertaining. But can I say he's better than a John Elway? No. Can I say he's better than Tom Brady? No. Can I say he's better than Joe Montana? No. Can I say he's better than, you start working down the list. He's as good as, he's as good as a bunch of these guys that we look at. Like, he's as good as Breeze in a lot of ways. He's as good as, other players that have similar bodies of work. And on pure talent, you could argue that he's as talented as anybody who's ever played the position. But that's where this is where the arguments get lost all the time when we talk about how good somebody is in a sport, is the actual talent versus results. Like, Zion Williamson might have been the most talented basketball player ever, but the results have not been there. Same for like a guy like Joel Embiid. He's a freak of nature athletically, but the results aren't there. And Aaron Rodgers has been a phenomenal quarterback, one of the most entertaining to watch. Like, if you just watch him play the game, execute an offense, do all those things, roll out, throw a ball 60 yards in the air, hang times up to the wazoo, almost hitting the rafters in Ford Field in Detroit, throwing Hail Marys. Those are phenomenal. But it's a lot more like Favre than people want to admit. And a lot of people want to be like, well, he's always been better than Favre. It's like, dial it back, think it through. It's a lot closer than you want to think. He's not going to surpass Favre in a lot of these different categories with the way the last couple of years have gone. And I can't see him winning a Super Bowl in Pittsburgh this year. So winds up with a very similar resume to a lot of guys that are really, really good, but I'm not putting them on the Mount Rushmore, the greatest of all time. I'm not. Talent-wise, maybe, but not results-wise. It's just the way it is. Another thing, back into a TV mindset as we pivot away from sports here for a moment. We got one of the many Yellowstone spinoffs. This time it's the Beth and Dutton spinoff, Dutton Ranch on Paramount Plus. And if my initial concern, and I have to give Marshalls more time, I have not continuously watched it. I will give you a proper season review at some point when I can get it to you. Everything I wanted, though, out of a Yellowstone spinoff is what I've seen so far early on in this one. Because it is hard. Because so much of the Dutton storyline had to do with John. And when you take John out of the equation, you take the ranch out of the equation, you go, all right, these characters are deeply interesting people. They have this family trauma. They have this history. They have this identity. We're going to put them in a new setting. And I'm not going to give spoilers away because the first two are already out and everybody can go back and watch and check up. And I think this is a really interesting setting for what they've set this story up to be. Because, yes, there has to be a little bit of Yellowstone karaoke in a show like this. You have to play the hits in some regards. But these characters are so strong, it can be a character study of Beth and Rip living their life with, in a new setting, knowing what they know, carrying that legacy, carrying that identity. And I have to say, through two episodes, the existing cast around him, Annette Bening, was really good in her role. I think, you can look up and down some of the supporting cast on the actual ranches are very good. This is something Taylor Sheridan does really well. Is building out the world around the main characters. They did that so well with Yellowstone and some of the other spin-offs they do, including some of the other shows that he's a showrunner for, creator for. Ed Harris, obviously a well-respected, well-revered actor in another high-profile role here. That's the other thing about Taylor Sheridan shows. He gets some incredible talents that want to work with him. If you just run down the list of like mainstay people that probably 10, 15 years ago wouldn't have done the streaming TV thing, now will jump at the opportunity to work with a guy like Taylor Sheridan. You've got Sylvester Stallone, Kevin Costner, Josh Lucas, you've got Annette Bening, you've got Kurt Russell, you've got you even got a guy like Samuel L. Jackson. You got all these different names from different walks of like major motion pictures and whatnot. And I know I'm leaving out names. You've got Sam Elliott. You've got, you know, all the Harrison Ford, Helen, Helen Mirren. I mean, you've got all these different high profile talent that are showing up in these shows because they want to be a part of the Taylor Sheridan, experience. And the writing is there usually. Now, in the last couple of years of a couple of those shows, it is, depending on the showrunner and the writing staff, there's been some misses in spots, but the talent is still high for so many of these shows. Like Landman's end of season 2 at Landman trended right back up, getting Billy Bob Thornton and everybody on that show back in the right direction. I think there's still promise that Tulsa can trend back up. But the starting page for Dutton Ranch is already off to a really good start, which gives me a lot of confidence going forward for Taylor Sheridan's new show with that. And again, streaming. They give you the freedoms to do more. Paramount Plus gives you more freedom than a show on like CBS would have. And it's sad that I have to judge everything based off that now, but now I look at normal TV and I go, you can't do certain things on it. Why am I supposed to invest in it? I can go watch streaming and give all the creative freedom to these, directors, writers, and, producers to go do what they want and tell a complete narrative. Now let's move to what's got my attention this week. So a little story time. I took a trip down to Charleston, South Carolina this weekend. I had been years ago, a couple different times in my life, probably 3-4 times in my life. Been to Patriots Point down there, which is a great site if you want to take some people to see some historic sites. I've had the privilege of raising an American flag at Fort Sumter through the Boy Scouts of America. I've had chances to go see, the nice parts of downtown and King Street and different part of like the major tourist sites of Charleston. But one of the things I got to do this weekend, and I had heard about this store, was I got to go to a record store, which I'm always up for a good record store trip. You've probably already seen from my documented collection on the show that's already come up that I love vinyl. I love collecting vinyl at this point. I think it sounds better. And it's funny because I run into people now that have that share that same appreciation and intrigue for this stuff. And you can go in stores now. And when I first started shopping for vinyl and CDs and other things, I went with my father, and I went with my father on Saturday as well. But when he and I would go in the beginning, it was just people that looked like my dad. And this is probably 10, 12 years ago, something like that. We used to have a local record store and CD store up in Charlotte that's no longer there anymore. Honestly, wish I could tell you the name of it, but it's been gone for so long that it's not there. And there's so many great record stores in Charlotte you can go check out. I'm glad to support like Repo. There's Lunchbox. There's this Poets Vault. There's some great places here locally. But I went to the record stop in Charleston, South Carolina. I believe there's another record stop. It's the same people, I believe, involved with, or at least the branding of the same one up in New York someplace. But they're set up in Charleston. They're right on King Street. And my dad and I went in there, and my dad had been in before. And he told me just about the massive catalog of stuff they had in there, and I was blown away. I mean, I light up to go into a record store nowadays and just see like artists, from all different genres and all these different things. And I shop for different things than I shopped 10 years ago. But the thing I always tell people is this: support local record stores however you can, because in these awful times in the way that the world has changed in shopping and online and everything, to get real interaction, to tangibly pick something up, physically hold it, flip through the booklet or open the gatefold and do all those things, it's so rewarding. When you flip through the bin and you find the right thing, I mean, it's like catching a fish or jumping a dirt hill on a bike or something. Like, it's a rush. Like, and it's not the same thing as that. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's exhilarating. You find something. It's like finding an artifact. Like, oh, look, I found it. You dust the cobwebs off it. It's great. But it's also something I share with my father, and that's a bonding activity I love to do with him, and it's a lot of fun. But I went into the record stop in Charleston, and I came home with some goodies, and I'm here to show you them on this week's edition of What's Got My Attention, because these will all have my attention for the foreseeable future. And if you have followed anything I've talked about or know me personally, you know that I am an unabashed Gary Moore fanboy. Gary Moore is probably in my top 3 or 4 favorite guitarists of all time. Maybe top 3, top 2. Like, if I'm doing it off the top of my head, the 3 players that I listen to and love the most of any guitar players, or actually, I'll give you my 5. This is a terribly rushed way to do this. No order. Ace Frehley, Eddie Van Halen, Gary Moore, Eric Clapton, and if you're just talking about players that I listen to, it's probably Stevie Ray Vaughan or like Keith Richards for that 5th spot. I'll say Stevie, just because of, like, as far as, like, fascinated as a lead guitar player. Like, Mick's more of a rhythm player, and I love Mick. But if you're asking me just for my 5 that I listen to the most, it's probably those guys. Although, like I said, Stones have been hot for me recently, so Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and all those guys, and that band with Mick Taylor as well. Like, we talked about it in the Rolling Stones episode. They've been in my circulation, and Hendrix is right there. Like, this is where Richie Blackmore. I could do this all night, and I'll probably will at some point give you the top 10 guitar players list that I have, at least personally, because this is all it is. It's all personal opinion. But Gary Moore, rarefied air for me. First one I found here, and this is hard for me because I obviously have to figure out how to show things. Gary Moore, Blues for Jimmy. I love this. His takes on Jimi Hendrix discography live. You get a couple members of the Experience joining him on stage with performances by Mitch Mitchell on drums and Billy Cox on bass for a couple songs. It was great. His version of Red House I heard from the Fender like anniversary show years ago was phenomenal. That was my introduction to him playing Hendrix music, but then he does this whole concert. And I mean, his takes on Hendrix are awesome, because sometimes my only issue with Hendrix live is because of the way it was recorded at the time, like, it just kind of like veers off into you lose the plot, so to speak, with it, because it's so loud. There's so much reverb. There's so much things going on, and it just kind of like, you kind of lose focus of it all. What I love about Gary's playing of Hendrix stuff is it always kind of comes back, and it always kind of stays together. The problem with Hendrix, you have to remember, back in the 60s, is so much of his, like, early live shows that they have documented, it just kind of fades off into the abyss. The sound goes everywhere. It's so trippy and acid rocky, and it's the invention of so much music, but ultimately it just kind of gets lost in a wash. And one of the things I love about Gary as a player is Gary's tone is so dialed in, and it's specific. You can hear all the notes, you can hear everything, and he plays with fire. I mean, he's the ultimate bull in a china shop player, especially as much as Gary's later career was all about the blues and whatnot. He had that hard rock, heavy metal aspect to him of playing with, precision and, speed and all these different things. And I know he talked bad about a lot of that stuff later in his career because he loved the blues so much, but it added to what he was able to do as a player in a blues setting, or in a setting like this, covering a guy like Hendrix, a musical hero of his and everybody else's. Like, if you're not a Jimi Hendrix guy, I don't even know what you're doing. And like I said, if I have more time to figure it out, I would probably, be able to give you a better top 10 list. But Gary Moore is easily in my top 3. I love Gary Moore. I love his discography. And that's why I also got this one. This is Blues for Greenie. So very few. It's hard to find Gary Moore in any record store. So when I find it, I just have to buy up what I can get. This album is it specifically says it's not a tribute. It is a thank you to Peter Green, the original founding member of Fleetwood Mac, who was an incredibly revolutionary and groundbreaking guitarist in England when Fleetwood Mac started. He's not known for any of the big Fleetwood Mac hits. He's not on, the big albums like Rumors and stuff because he had already left the band at that point. But his musical input with like Oh Well and some of the other big hits, like Green Manalishi, songs that show up with like Judas Priest, like Green Manalishi was a song I heard through Judas Priest before I heard it in that context. But Oh Well, I heard by the Rockets first before I heard the Fleetwood Mac version. Like, he had been in John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. He comes into Fleetwood Mac, puts that band together kind of, and really sets, both vocally and playing wise, and then just kind of takes a break and kind of goes away from music and has his own story to tell in that regard. But Gary was so influenced by it. And Greenie, the most iconic of all Les Pauls, is the one that he acquired from Peter Green and then played for the next 30 years before ultimately having to part with it, and then ultimately wound up in possession of Kirk Hammond, who bought it a couple years ago. It's the most iconic, greatest sounding Les Paul you're ever going to find. He plays it all over this album. It tells the story on the inside. It's actually pretty neat. If you read the gatefold here, it tells you this story. It's all written out. And it's again, some great old school blues tracks and influence there as well. So it's a lot of fun to listen to that album. And then you go back, I've got the last of the Gary Moore records. I did not have his original first solo record, which is Back on the Streets. This is an example around the time between... There was a lot of in and out with Gary Moore when it came to Thin Lizzy, and I love what he put down. My favorite Thin Lizzy album of all time is Black Rose. He's a player on that in the guitar duo with Scott Gorham. But his contributions in writing partnership with Phil Lynott is phenomenal. Phil's on a couple of these tracks as well. Don't Believe a Word, which showed up on, I believe, Thin Lizzy's... I think it's Johnny the Fox. I believe that album is where it came up on. Back on the Streets, he's on with that one as well. I mean, there's some really phenomenal playing, but I think the most hauntingly beautiful, like, guitar track between, what he does and the vocals he splits with Phil is Parisian Walkways. And you can just see the back cover there. This isn't even the original cover that I saw, so I don't know when this cover came out. This is, I guess, a 2015 reissue. But again, this is a great album as well. It covers a lot of ground for what Gary Moore would do, had already done, would later do. I mean, it really does set like the bedrock of what Gary Moore does. And then, my favorite album being Still Got the Blues. It's just incredible. Now moving over to the Kiss fandom side of things. I've always grew up, especially in the early days of listening to podcasts, like my favorite podcast of all time is History Science Theater. I remember listening to those guys, Adam, Lee, and Dez, talk about buying bootlegs. And as a kid, I always wanted a bootleg. And, I heard about like vinyl bootlegs and cassette bootlegs, CD bootlegs. Well, this is a bootleg of a live show from 1977. This is from the Cow Palace in San Francisco, August 16th, 1977. There's also another date on the back here from a show in Fort Worth. I'm not sure what's the deal with that, if they had to incorporate something else on it. But you can tell this is definitely a custom job because it's all printed. It's got later years lineup makeup characters, and then a picture of this kind of morphed up version of the first album. It's definitely a bootleg, but it's got like a printed core label and everything, and it's on yellow vinyl. I mean, and I know this show. I've listened to this show before, so to get the, hopefully get a Love vinyl copy of this will be a lot of fun to listen to. Because on the Love Gun tour, Kiss is just hitting on all strokes. Between the Love Gun Alive 2 tour, I mean, it's phenomenal. As I just mentioned, Ace Frehley's the man who made me pick up a guitar along with Eddie Van Halen. He was always my favorite member of Kiss. Him and Peter were always like my guys. Like in the beginning, I was a Peter guy, and then I became an Ace guy, and I became obsessed with both of them. And I love Kiss all through time, and I love the entire history. But those are my guys. And Ace, we lost Ace tragically last year as well. And that, I mean, you want to talk about? We talked about it at the top of the show. Losing people that you love and you're fascinated by, and you just obsessed by. Like, there are very few, if any, that have ever beat me up, as a fan, as somebody I never met, than both Eddie and Ace in the last like 4 or 5 years. It's just been whew, I mean, those are the two celebrity deaths that I remember just being like, I needed to be left alone. Like, that's the way it was. But I own pretty much the major portions of Ace's discography now on vinyl. Well, I shouldn't say I own most of them. I own the first two solo releases, all the original Kiss albums from the makeup years that he was on, except for except for Unmasked and The Elder on vinyl. I have the first two solo releases. I don't have Second Sighting from Fraley's Comet yet. It's not my favorite Ace album, but this is as good as the first album is. I mean, this is a phenomenal. This is Trouble Walking. This is a for all the later earlier to mid 80s pop of the first Fraley's Comet record. This has a lot more of that New York street griminess that Ace was so well known for. And he kind of, really lays it all to bear on this album. You got great songs, Shot Full of Rock, 5-Card Stud, Lost in Limbo, Trouble Walking. I mean, it's a phenomenal record. And it was one I wanted on vinyl that I could never find on vinyl. So, just phenomenal stuff there. And last up, always looking for more blues records, always looking for the classics. Got me a copy of B.B. King's Guess Who. And if you're ever bored and you're just scrolling around on Facebook or Twitter, occasionally you'll see a clip from a B.B. King show in his later years where Derek Trucks is playing the solo from Guess Who on slide. And it's one of those videos that always stops me. Like, no matter where I am, I'll stop and watch it. But if you try to work through and collect more B.B. King records, it's very hard because not every place has it. This place had everything a guy could want. Completely Well and all the different albums that, were famous for. Like, I have Completely Well. I think I got that maybe a year ago, and I love that. It's probably my favorite B.B. King record, top to bottom. And I'm always looking for B.B. King, Albert King, Freddie King. I have a couple Albert records. I have a couple B.B. King records. I have very few Freddie King records. I want Texas Cannonball. That's the one I really want, and I can't ever seem to find in most record store places. And I know I could ask for it, but I just never bothered to do it. But this one was one I wanted to have. I found it, and I said, that one's coming home with me. So there you go. That is probably one of the most productive trips to a record store I've ever had. Not going to tell you what I paid for it. You can go find them for yourself. But when I was like, you just start the stack. We're going home with all these. I don't care what we have to do because it's so hard to find. And if you have a local record store, wherever you might be watching, if you're into music, even getting new stuff, I say all the time, don't buy something, don't go to Walmart and buy a copy of Hotel California. Go to the record store. You can get the original copy instead of the remaster or get the real original sounding 1976 version of that. It'll sound better. I'm serious. More often than not, the original pressings sound better. Now, sometimes you'll get a dirty one. You have to watch it, but most of these record stores are on the ball. So shout out to the record stop in Charleston, South Carolina. That's where I hooked up with all those, and you can go online. I think they have an online presence as well, and check them out there. But if you're in Charleston, got to go by and check it out. Well, that's going to wrap up our show. Tonight's show was probably going to be a little bit more in-depth on a couple other topics, but we had a lot to cover, and the tragic loss of Kyle Busch is kind of taking our whole focus, basically, for the last couple hours. And again, we send our condolences to the entire Busch family and the NASCAR family as a whole as we get ready for what will still be an eventful weekend, I'm sure, obviously under a more cloudier sadness overall for the loss of one of the best race car drivers of all time. That's going to wrap up our show, though. So thank you all for doing what you do in each and every week. And if I can leave you with one final message here tonight, it is this. If you have loved ones in your life, go home and hug them. Hug them, love them, keep them around, appreciate every day, and appreciate those that you love every day. You never know when it'll be your last. Thank you guys for listening to another edition of the Collins Janus Show.